Good afternoon, everybody. This is another episode of the Basketball Show, 6 o'clock Eastern Time on the 20th day of February 2018, talking about baseball, sports, and unifying America. I want to throw the number out there if you're interested to call and be part of the show. That is 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. I'm going to talk a little bit of baseball today, and we'll talk maybe a little NFL, but most importantly, whatever is on your mind, feel free to contact the show. I just gave the number if you want to comment on the Facebook feed as well as the Periscope feed. And somebody commented at the end of the show yesterday. I'm going to look at that 30 for 30 special that you mentioned, and then once I know a little bit about it and maybe I can watch it, I will go over it, maybe one of the other shows during the rest of the week. And, I'm sure it had something to do with baseball agents and maybe Scott Boras in particular. But we're going to touch on that later on in the week. And I just want to let everybody know, you could comment through either Facebook Live or Periscope. And I'll try within reason. I'm not going to really take a lot of time to deal with and answer trolls, but if you have any comments or anything sports related that you want to discuss, or comments that anything that I've said, we're going to keep the discussion going, and that I give you as a promise. I wanted to start out today by talking about something that kind of frustrates me, and you see it happen a lot when it comes to the NCAA. And they're pretty big on doing this. They feel like they're getting some sort of vindication. They feel like they're penalizing schools with the ability to take away things that happened already. And, of course, if you look at the news today, you find out that Louisville, because of some sex scandals that were involved with recruits and stuff like that, the NCAA has decided that they are going to strip them of a national title that they won in 2013. Not only that, but they're going to take away the Final Four appearance that they had in 2012. And I mentioned this when it goes to college football. And I tell you, the NCAA, I think their intentions deep down are good. I think they care a little bit about, the sanctity and the dignity of the game and the kids that they represent and follow. But could they be any more out of their mind? Could they be any more offline and just downright silly in regards to this thought that they could take things that happened before and just make believe they didn't happen? Like stripping the Louisville team of their national championship that they won in basketball in 2013 is going to all of a sudden say that didn't happen. Like the kids that were on that basketball team, particularly the kids that had nothing to do with what ends up happening with these sanctions that are thrown down by the NCAA. Do you think they're going to forget that they won a national championship, number one? Do you think Rick Pitino is going to look at himself in a little bit of a different light now? And he's going to say, you know what? That national championship that I remember winning, that banner that I remember being raised, that trophy that I held with those kids, that discussion about how proud I was of those guys and how we all worked together to win this thing is all going to decide suddenly that nothing happened. That all of a sudden, because the NCAA has decided that what Louisville has done, or the things that were going on behind the scenes, all of a sudden they did not win a national championship. And that's because the NCAA has said that. Now I'll tell you, the more that they continue to do this, and I was ranting the same way when the NCAA decided that so many of Joe Paterno's wins that he had as the football coach at Penn State all of a sudden didn't count. Now, they came to their senses. They decided to reinstate him. I don't know if it was because of the law. I don't know if it went to court. I don't know if this was, a process that went through, and all of a sudden the NCAA decided that, Joe Paterno's wins as a football coach, first of all, had nothing to do with Jerry Sandusky. You want to say that Joe Paterno was a little negligent? You think that maybe at some point he may have seen something and should have spoken up, should not have allowed this man to continuously be employed on his staff? That's a completely different subject. That has nothing to do with wins and losses. Do you think the families and the victims of Jerry Sandusky and his heinous, disgusting actions, the fact that boys' lives were ruined forever and they'll never be able to let down what this man did to them, you think that stripping Joe Paterno of a couple wins in college football games is going to do anything to change what Jerry Sandusky did to those kids? And once again, the NCAA is at it again. They feel that if they take away the national championship that Louisville won as a college basketball team in 2013, that everything's going to be good now. All of a sudden, the actions of the staff, the actions of the boosters and the recruiters, they're going to feel a lot worse for what they did, because the NCAA now says that Louisville did not win the national championship in 2013. I mean, can you be any more ignorant or just short-sighted? Or I don't know what other word you could use when you're describing this. But one thing clearly has nothing to do with the other. I know we've gone back, whether it's, Reggie Bush's Heisman Trophy. And the NCAA feels like they are governing their sport, maybe in an unprecedented way, because it's not the way that any professional sport governs itself. It's certainly not the way that any educational body governs itself. But now you decide to take things away that already happened. And to me, I'll make a direct comparison to the rhetoric that you hear in regards to the baseball players today in Major League Baseball and their implications in steroids. And not so much whether or not they should be in the Hall of Fame, but what to do with the records that were set. Because somebody, and I know there's people out there that believe this, and so if you believe this, please speak it. Like I said, call the show, 732-364-3598. Comment on Facebook Live. Comment on Periscope. If you are amongst those that believe that Barry Bonds should have home runs discredited to him because he used steroids, that Roger Clemens should have to give up Cy Young awards that he won because he was supposedly using steroids, or you want to make it a little bit further, and you really want to make this whole silly situation that the NCAA is creating, you want to make it sound sillier, tell me how many hits should Major League Baseball take away from Pete Rose because he bet on baseball after he was a retired player and a manager? Can anybody tell me if any of this makes any sense? Because I'm not seeing any logic here whatsoever. And it's not the first time the NCAA has done stuff like this. They've taken away wins. They've taken away national championships. They have to rewrite the almanac, the sports almanac, that talks about all the championships in the history of professional sports. And the NCAA wants to rewrite it and take national championships away from teams that already won. The players on the court in 2013 did nothing to compromise the results of their national championship. And I don't even think this is a point where we're talking about these players being penalized. Because you say the players are being penalized if you want, which I think is the NCAA's perspective. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, you know what, we're going to punish the kids that were on that team because of what the boosters were doing, because of what some coaches were doing, some people that were affiliated with the basketball program were doing. So if we take this national championship away from the kids, we'll really make our point. If there's a single kid that was on that championship team that doesn't feel like a national champion today, I don't know what to say to you. That team won the national championship. They were in the Final Four the year before. They made it back to the Final Four the next year, won the whole thing. And I don't care how much you dislike Rick Pitino if you do. I don't care how much the NCAA is upset at Rick Pitino and Louisville. But to say that you're going to all of a sudden make believe that a team that won the national championship, which, by the way, I watched it. I wasn't there, but I saw it on TV. There were thousands of people that were there that watched it happen. Millions of people watched it on television. And we were still in the technology age then, so I'm sure there was many people that followed on the internet and through their mobile devices in 2013. So are you all of a sudden going to call on all these people and say, all right, you guys now have amnesia? I want to remind you that Louisville did not win the national championship in 2013. If you thought it happened, you must forget it. Any evidence that you have that proves that Louisville won the national championship in 2013 needs to be erased and deleted. I wonder what they're going to do with the game tape. Is the NCAA going to take property or take ownership of the game tape where it was played on whatever national network it was on, whether it was CBS, ABC, whatever it was on? Or is the NCAA now going to go after the game tape of the national championship game in 2013 that Louisville happened to win? Because they got a lot of evidence to get rid of if they don't want to sound like complete fools. And the NCAA wants their word to mean something. They want their word to have value. They want to be able to make a statement, a factual-based statement, and have the general public believe anything that comes out of their mouth. So now they're going to try to tell you that the Louisville Cardinals were not the national champions in college basketball in 2013. And you're supposed to believe that. If you had any knowledge of it, if you had any evidence to think that it may have happened, you must forget about it. You must forget that it ever existed. The NCAA, I think in some cases, is too smart for their own good. And that word smart that I just used was in a very patronizing way. And I still laugh. And obviously the Sandusky scandal is the furthest thing from a laughing matter. But the NCAA thinking that they are going to possibly make those kids that were sexually assaulted by Jerry Sandusky feel better because they took wins away from Joe Paterno as the head coach of the Penn State Nittany Lions. They're better off now? The kids are going to be okay. Kids that were sexually assaulted are going to be okay now because the NCAA decided to take wins away from Joe Paterno. And I'm sorry to bring a serious matter up like that, but there's no other way to pound this point home. The NCAA is embarrassing itself as a governing body. And what I'm basically saying, if They feel that they can all of a sudden make believe that the Louisville Cardinals didn't win the College Basketball National Championship. And you're supposed to forget every memory that you have of it. Forget the tape. If you got the tape, you must burn the tape. Get rid of it. Put it all in the landfill. They're going to have a big bonfire. It's all going to go up in smoke because the NCAA says that this did not happen. And the kids that may, in some cases, some of the kids on that team may not have another positive moment going on in the rest of their life. May have fallen on some hard times. And may have been able to hold on to the fact that they were part of a college basketball championship with Louisville. I don't care if it's your defining moment in your life, but according to the NCAA, you must forget it. In addition, the NCAA feels that those that were screwing up at Louisville, how much the coach was involved, I don't think we'll ever know. How much were assistant coaches involved, how much were boosters involved, how much were recruiters involved. That everybody that did wrong in this particular instance in Louisville, which, by the way, the school's on probation, they're getting dealt with. They're having penalties where they can't play in March Madness. But you know what? You want to really make Louisville feel like they did something wrong and to know to never do it again? Let's take away something that happened. Because the NCAA has a bigger power than the Lord Jesus Christ. Or you know what? For those that don't believe in JC, whoever your God is. According to the NCAA, there's the NCAA's ruling and then God right underneath it. The NCAA has the ability to make something that already happened not happen. Which, unfortunately, with the great powers that God has, God cannot erase something that's already happened. But the NCAA can. And they still think that taking a bunch of wins away from Joe Paterno as the head coach of Penn State in college football is going to make up for the heinous, disgusting, horrific acts of Jerry Sandusky. Man, I tell you, those kids must have been jumping for joy when the NCAA said they're going to take away wins from Joe Paterno. But that's apparently the NCAA's, what they feel like the power that they have. They are, number one, they're so strong of a governing body, they have the ability to make something that happened not happen. And once again, I'm waiting. When are they going to have the big pile of all the game tapes of that national championship game all put in a pile and burned? Because the NCAA said it didn't happen. In all honesty, I mean, it's a Mickey Mouse organization there in the first place. You think if they did a little better of a job, they could prevent, these scandals from impacting these schools. And obviously, not to make any light at all of the Penn State situation, which is completely different. But I'm talking about the NCAA, the power that may be. They feel like they're going to try to correct things that happened years ago. Which, by the way, how does it take 4 years to realize that Louisville screwed things up? Or a couple years, however however long it took them, after these acts of what these people were doing in regards to getting, strippers and prostitutes or whatever it is that they were doing. Giving a player, a prospective, player that they're looking to sign to get a letter of intent from, showing them a little bit of a good time. And you're going to talk about years later after this happens? And the NCAA says, hey, Louisville won a national championship. Let's take it away from them. Listen, anybody that, number one, was alive that time has proof that they won a national championship. And number two, isn't it an insult to anybody's intelligence? And like I said, I feel for that kid. And he might be the 12th or 13th man on that Louisville bench that played in that national championship game. Maybe he got a minute on the court. Maybe he didn't. But he's lived the last 5 years of his life marveling in the fact that he was on a team that won a national championship. And now he is told by the NCAA that that didn't happen. So you're taking the one thing that happened good in this kid's life, and now you're telling him he's a liar. He was on the court. He was there when the clock struck 000. And now he's going to have to see a psychiatrist for the rest of his life because the NCAA told him that he didn't win. They didn't win. And the NCAA announces it 5 years later. Oh, by the way, those memories you had of winning that game, that didn't exist. So think about the psychological damage. You got a kid that now has to see a shrink for the rest of his life. All because the NCAA is trying to pull a power trip. Reggie Bush took away his Heisman Trophy. O.J. Simpson likely was involved in the murder of his wife, whether he did it himself or somebody he knew did it. Even though he was found not guilty, the NCAA, hey, take his Heisman Trophy away from him. That's going to make Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman rest in peace. Take a stupid piece of silverware or whatever material it's made out of and take it back. The NCAA has pretty much a solution for everything. Think about it. Think if we ever lived in a society, and I don't know, maybe down the road technology could take over. And I've suggested all along, not that it's my idea or something that I want, but we will get to a point in society where we all will have some sort of chip put inside us. Whether it's connected to our brains, whether it's, it's something through maybe a spectrum or something that's going to be able to determine our every move and our every thought. So maybe in this new generation, whether it's 20 years from now or 50 years from now or 100 years from now, when you can look into a computer and read somebody's mind and keep track of their thoughts, the NCAA is already ahead of the game. They've already been able to erase things that have already happened. They've been able to take things that used to be facts, and in fact were proven facts, and erase them from existence. And like I said, that hardcore anti-steroid guy, whether you're a baseball fan, whether you're a baseball analyst, whether you played professional baseball yourself, It's what you're looking to do to Barry Bonds. But the sad thing about it is, depending on your definition of cheating, you would have more of a justifiable cause to take home runs away from Barry Bonds than you would take away a national championship that there's tape that proved that it happened. Because you know what? A future Louisville recruit that's going to be playing, college basketball down the road, getting a lap dance, sure as heck didn't give them an unfair advantage in that game that they won in 2013. Certainly didn't give them an unfair advantage in 2012 when they went to the Final Four. Wouldn't you think if a little lap dance and hopefully some promiscuity can help college basketball teams win? A lot more teams would be doing it. A lot more teams would turn their locker room into a brothel. But guess what? It doesn't impact wins and losses. There's teams that don't win a game or win 1 or 2 games a season that their prospective players are getting a lap dance. The NCAA has got it all figured out, though. Tell a group of people that a fact is no longer a fact. I guess it's a summary of 2018 as we see it. The time in history where facts aren't facts anymore. You already have opinions being reported in the news as facts. Now let's impact actual facts and erase them. And like I said, this is one of those movies that you could see the chips being put inside people and things that have happened are all of a sudden erased through the chip. And because of that, any memory that any Louisville player, Rick Pitino, the coaching staff, or anybody that's associated with that university has of winning that national championship has been erased. So just forget about it. It didn't happen. Nothing to see here. Moving on. Once again, the number if you want to be involved is 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. You could also comment on the Periscope feed or the Facebook Live feed. Anything that's on your mind in the world of baseball, sports, and unifying America. Moving into the world of baseball. When I first heard this little back and forth, my gut reaction was not to talk about it. And then the more I thought about it, the more I kind of thought it fit my own little narrative in regards to things that I do mention on the show. Bryce Harper, essentially baited by the media, asked direct questions about the Miami Marlins, what they've done this offseason, which from a team building standpoint, and a team building standpoint I mean for 2018 right now and in the immediate future, looks terrible. The Marlins may be setting themselves up for the 2022 World Series championship as we hit the halfway point here in the Pass Ball Show. So what the Marlins may be doing now may benefit them years down the road. They may be building the best farm system in the history of Major League Baseball. So when they finally get good, they're going to win not only once, but a whole bunch of times. And even if that's all true, what they did this offseason basically stripped that team of all the talent and every little remnants of a positive, potential winning culture away from the team. Giancarlo Stanton Marcell Ozuna, Christian Yelich. All amongst those that were traded from the Miami Marlins. The Marlins got younger players, and for the most part, for the exception of Starlin Castro, and maybe the Sierra guy they got from the Cardinals, they got a whole bunch of players that are probably not playing in the major leagues this year. But you got reporters who feel it's their job now. Let's bait anybody we can to try to get the response that we're looking for. Our narrative, or what we're looking to do, is hopefully to get some high-profile players to knock the Miami Marlins for what they're doing. So Bryce Harper, he may have taken a bait, but the question wasn't asked in a nasty way. What does he think of the Marlins' moves this offseason? And Bryce Harper is thinking, you traded Giancarlo Stanton, you traded Marcell Ozuna, you traded Christian Yelich. The Marlins are still looking to trade other players. It obviously hurts their chances to succeed this year. And Bryce Harper made that opinion known. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what everybody else thinks anyway. Bryce Harper goes on to compliment the Miami Marlins where they stood before they decided to make all these trades. Says, hey, maybe a pitcher or two, and they're right up there with anybody in the National League East. They may have had the best outfield in all of Major League Baseball. So, of course, for those vultures in the media that are looking to suck up a story any way they can, they make the headlines. Bryce Harper doesn't think the Marlins are going to be very good this year. Now, apparently, Bryce Harper's opinion is more valuable than anybody else's. Because I would say there's probably in tens of millions at least of people that follow baseball that think the Miami Marlins right now going into the 2018 season stink. This team is probably the worst team in baseball. Ask none other than Las Vegas, who has them predicted to have the fewest amount of wins in all of Major League Baseball. The PECOTA rating system, which factors in all types of different numbers, has the Miami Marlins pegged to have the fewest amount of wins in all of Major League Baseball. Yet the media gets this gem from Bryce Harper, who, by the way, did not do anything wrong. And not only that, slings it with a whole bunch of mud sucked into it towards Don Mattingly, asked him the question in a way that he responds in an angry way. Now, Don Mattingly, I understand. He's getting paid by the Miami Marlins. He likes his job. He's getting paid pretty well. And in his heart of hearts, he wants what's best for the Miami Marlins. Short for the future, but certainly for the, right now. He wants to hold on to that thought of that possibility, that shot, that maybe the Miami Marlins could put a couple wins together and overachieve this year. But you know what? That's his job, and his job only. Because he's getting paid by the Miami Marlins. He's their manager right now. His job is to get the most out of the kids that are playing on the field. So the last person that's going to say that the Miami Marlins suck is Don Mattingly. But apparently the media doesn't understand this. So they make it as a story of, Bryce Harper versus Don Mattingly. Ha, ha, ha. Can't imagine, the ass clowns with the two set monitors showing their faces. The Stephen A. Smiths and the Skip Baylesses of the world. can't wait. Probably in their own mind think it's a non-story, but their stupid networks that they work for are telling them, oh man, you got to talk about this. Harper versus Mattingly. Ha ha ha. Could be a bigger crock of shit. But the problem is, the media, the baseball media, is having a rough off season. You know, you had a day yesterday where you could talk about J.D. Martinez. A couple days before, you could talk about Eric Hosmer. But a couple months where very little was going on. So somebody has a bright idea, says, hey, let's beat Bryce Harper and see if he could knock the Miami Marlins, and take that information and take it to Don Mattingly and get his response. Bryce Harper was 100% right. And you know what? The only thing Bryce Harper did wrong was he didn't state how bad the Miami Marlins really are. They're a little league team. I feel bad for the veteran players that are going out there playing baseball for them in 2018. JT Realmuto, the catcher, can't wait to get out of there. He can't leave Miami and South Florida fast enough. And I'm sure if you polled a handful of other players on their team, you'd find that most of them agree. Most of them want to play well. Shoot, they're playing a child game, right? What's going on, Nick? This is the Pass Ball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com. The number, if you want to call the program, 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. So you got that silly situation with the media, which, like I said, is a non-story. It really isn't a big deal. You know, you get Bryce Harper's name behind something, and all of a sudden it becomes a bigger deal than it should be. But we look at things in a landscape of how do they apply to reality in sports. And are we supposed to be offended because most people think that the Miami Marlins stink? I mean, if anything, Don Mattingly should hold a team meeting after he's done drinking his Kool-Aid because he wants to keep his job, and hold a meeting, discuss with his team, maybe show the Bad News Bears, you know, the ending when they win, show the beginning of Major League, maybe set up something where it's Derek Jeter in a full body photo, and every win that they get, they could take a little piece of Derek Jeter's clothes off. And once they clinch the division title, you can see a naked Derek Jeter. Bottom line is, the Marlins are not expected to be very good this year. And listen, I think anything's possible. I remember the first set of my baseball predictions that I did in 2012. There was a team on the West Coast called the Oakland Athletics. They had an offseason that was pretty similar to what we saw from the Miami Marlins. They made a series of trades, got rid of a lot of very good talent, and a lot of very good players that weren't really that old, that were entering the prime of their career. They got a lot of younger players in return, a couple players that were useful to help them, you know, more sooner than later, but in most cases, more later than sooner. And this was a team that was expected to finish with the worst record in the entire Major League Baseball. Now, I had some people that got pretty pissed off at me for making that prediction. Because remember, this was the same time that the Houston Astros were going through their rebuild. And the Houston Astros at that time were really the worst team of the worst team. They were challenging the 1962 Mets. They were challenging the 2003 Detroit Tigers. In fact, they might have even been challenging the 1899 Cleveland Spiders. And if you want to know what it's like to see a futile season, please go on to baseballreference.com and research the 1899 Cleveland Spiders. The Astros may not have been on that level, but they were down. They were close to the 62 Mets. They were close to the 2003 Tigers. I looked at it and said, you know what? Maybe they'll finish a couple games better than the Oakland Athletics, because I was that down on what the Athletics did. The Athletics still had some competitive fire. They managed to compete a little bit better that season than expected. So that's what I would suggest if you're the Miami Marlins, if you're Don Mattingly. Try to get the most you can out of your team. And I understand that Don Mattingly's not going to say it publicly. He's not going to say that the Marlins aren't going to do any good, because he's going to do the best he can to get the most out of the players he's got. And if General Manager Michael Hill wants to make a couple more trades, he wants to trade Real Muto, he wants to trade Dan Straley, he wants to trade Brad Ziegler, he wants to trade Martin Prado, Starlin Castro, Justin Bour. Anybody else on that team that he wants to trade, Don Mattingly has nothing to do about it. There's nothing he can do to change that. So if all those players are traded in addition to the ones that are already gone, Don Mattingly still has a job to do. His job is to get the most out of the players that he has. And when some ass clown from the media decides to ask him what he thinks about anybody, let alone Bryce Harper, anybody that's down on the Marlins because they traded the best outfield in Major League Baseball, which they already had. They're a good team with Stanton and Yelich and Ozuna. You can't deny that. I know Don Mattingly understands that. And is he all of a sudden going to try to sell you on this Sierra guy? He's going to try to sell you on Lewis Brinson? He may be a pretty good player. He's a top 100 prospect in Major League Baseball. He's going to sell you on Isan Diaz, shortstop they picked up in the deal with the Brewers. All these players might be good, but I'll tell you, the chance or the probability that they could be good enough to even fight for a 500 record this year is very minuscule. And I think when I'm telling you that they're going to win 60 games this year or this coming year, they're going to have to scrap and claw to win those 60 games. In fact, 60 wins with this trash team should get Don Mattingly the National League Rookie of the Year award. I'm sorry, the Manager of the Year award. And I'm sure within that, there'll be some Rookie of the Year on the Miami Marlins, because they sure as heck aren't going to do it with the players that they got on this team. And I've spent a lot of time taking shots at Scott Boras, and I think there's a lot of things that he's doing that isn't right, that doesn't have the best interest of his players. But one thing he is right on about, this race to the bottom that exists in Major League Baseball. The fact that you're looking at teams that are this bad and they have no intention on getting any better. They're going to battle for that number 1 overall draft pick, which, by the way, if they stink and somebody stinks a little more, they might only get 1 or 2 or 3 picks ahead of them. But once again, we're talking about a league that we have now that's being run by the analytics crowd and people that want to look at numbers as opposed to studying the actual action that goes on a baseball field. I want to see one of these teams, these analytic savvy teams, decide to go away from scouting altogether just to prove how silly it is. But you don't have you have guys that are getting paid to judge what they see. Look at the talents, look at the tools, but project those talents and skills to show what in the future a player is going to be. That's existed in baseball since its inception. But a job of an analyst is to look at the projection of a team, look at numbers that exist with players. Sure, take a couple prospects that the Miami Marlins have. Rate them the best you can. See what they expect out of them as you're going for the future. Can they be a star? Can they be a pretty good player? Can they be a major league regular? And put that in the short term to say, hey, what could happen this year? And the best of the best could happen. And I tell you, if everything goes right for the Miami Marlins, they'll have 62 wins this year. They'll have 100 losses. And that's going to be hard to not be the worst team in baseball. But the problem is, there's a handful of teams that are competing with the Marlins. Are we going to hit a point in baseball history where you're going to see more teams competing for the number 1 overall pick in the draft, more teams competing for the worst record in all of baseball, than you have teams competing for a World Series championship? Is it more lucrative to finish with the worst record than to win the World Series? Once again, baseball is separating itself in a silly way. Why should you have a group of 5 to 7 teams that are all in competition with each other before the season even starts to have the worst record in baseball? Whoops, we got too much talent here. Let's trade Garrett Cole. Let's trade Andrew McCutchen. Marlins say, hold my beer. Let's trade our entire outfield. We want the first pick. Yet if this stuff was going on in the NBA or the NFL, the media would be going nuts over it. Why do you think the NBA ended up coming to a draft lottery? Because teams were losing on purpose so they could get the number 1 overall pick. But my friends, in baseball, it's okay. Got your team down to a point where you have absolutely no talent and do anything short of pulling a Gary Sheffield and throwing the ball away on purpose with the Milwaukee Brewers. Doing anything short of Chick Gandil and Happy Felch and Swede Risberg of the 1919 Black Sox. And it's okay. It's okay for baseball teams to tank. And I tell you, this is one point that I agree 100% with Scott Boras about. There's fans of these teams. And you know what? When you have 2 of these crap teams that care about nothing else but losing as many games as possible, when they're playing each other, the fans shouldn't have to pay a dime. A Marlins-Pirates game in Miami this year should be free. And at the very least, any proceeds made off of concessions in the stands should go to a charity. And it's a shame what's happening in those regions because this is a new winning philosophy. I didn't like it when the Houston Astros did it. You could easily come at me and say, well, they won the World Series in 2017. And they may very well have the best record or the best team in Major League Baseball going into 2018. And I can't tell you you're wrong. But what about the fans of 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014? The fans at that point deserved less? What about those that didn't have that long to live? What about those fans that ended up passing away in preceding years? Think of their beloved Houston Astros, and all they remember is their time is about to run out. Their expiration clock is timed. Their last Astros memory was how lousy of a baseball team they are. Excuse me. And the same thing's going to happen in Pittsburgh. The same thing's going to happen in Miami. And the Miami Marlins fans, well, they're used to it. This is what, the third or fourth time they've done this? Derek Jeter gets a clean slate because he just bought the team, which I understand. I'm not going to blame Derek Jeter for things that went on long before he bought the team. I'm not going to blame Bruce Sherman for what happened after the 1997 World Series, what happened in 2013. These were decisions that were made by other men. But I tell you, the Miami Marlins fans deserve better. And I'll tell you, whatever that time frame that you want to put out there, whatever that timetable you want to make, whether it's 3 years or 5 years or 7 years, hopefully it's no longer than 7 years. I don't care if the Marlins won 2 World Series in 97 and 2003. If this tear down, rebuild, and absolute gutting of talent for what we call a Major League Baseball team doesn't result in at least 1 World Series championship, they should be able to give refunds to their fans that went to games in this time frame. The Miami Marlins fans should put together a class action lawsuit against the Miami Marlins. And it's unfortunate because winning is not guaranteed. And this is the other thing that's frustrating about it from a baseball fan standpoint. You could come up with this immaculate plan, and this immaculate plan could be any way that you want it to be. You could spend the most money. You could be the most aggressive in regards to pursuing the best talent. You could have a great farm system and develop the best players. You could add on to those great players with other awesome players that you spend money on. And it's not going to guarantee you a World Series championship. You could quit playing baseball for years at a time. Get top draft picks. And bring in younger players. And it still isn't going to guarantee you anything. And the Pittsburgh Pirates, who have decided to go back to rebuilding, should know better. They literally wasted 20 years out of a very proud fan base's life not trying, gutting their team down multiple times, stockpiling top draft picks, which, by the way, their drafts were terrible for a long time. It took forever for them to start bringing guys up like McCutchen and Marte and Polanco and Garrett Cole. It guarantees you nothing, and it's a shame. The Pirates, who were once one of the more prouder franchises in baseball history. Ask anybody to follow that team from 1960 to 1980. When not only did they win World Series championships in 1960, 1971, and 1979, but they also made multiple playoff appearances in the 1970s. Had Roberto Clemente, Willie Stargell, Dave Parker, Al Oliver, Doc Ellis, Bruce Keeson, Steve Blass, Bill Mazeroski, it used to be a proud franchise. It's pretty sad right now. Pretty sad where I'm almost going to think about crying. I feel for that fan base. I feel for the Miami Marlins fan base. And they may not be in South Florida the biggest group of fans out there in Major League Baseball, but they should have something to be proud of, too. They don't. It's a shame that baseball teams are deciding to do this. Be back with you tomorrow, 6 to 7 p.m., right here on Periscope, Facebook Live, and on demand on YouTube. My YouTube video for yesterday is up. So you get to see that Mike Trombley interview, which I thought was pretty good. Mike added a lot to the show. I like talking to him about Fenway Park, bringing up Fever Pitch, the whole thing. So if you get a chance, check that out. This show will be on YouTube in a little while. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.